If you're a creative person, you're a bit of a paradox, because you're kind of a genius, but at the same time, you might feel a bit useless, like you can't really get anything done. It might be that you have exceptional ideas, potentially life-changing, culture-shifting, world-altering ideas, but you can't seem to execute any of them. There's this constant conflict happening inside you. You're addicted to the endless paths you could take and the endless possibilities of taking them. But when it comes time to make any one of those a reality, the fire goes out. And frustratingly, it's the people who don't have these amazing ideas that seem to be able to get things done no worries. Average stuff you know could be so much better if only you had a hand in it, is created, built, brought to life all the time. And that means it gets seen and used and experienced all the time. Because the people who have these average ideas don't have the same aversion to execution as you do. What kind of cruel setup is that? Why is it that so many creative people struggle to bring their great ideas into reality while so much mediocrity is produced every day? It must be some weird joke of biology or reality or something. Because what the creatives need, the uncreatives have, and vice versa. And there are at least a few big things that can explain this. First, creative people are inclined towards novelty and ideation. You, a creative, might love coming up with ideas, exploring perspectives, and thinking about all the possibilities that come along with a certain path. These are things you could do forever. But it might also mean you're less interested in the repetitive or structured tasks you need to do to actually bring these ideas to life. You'd much rather explore the idea, get your fill, and move on to one of the other million genius ideas that you've been pondering, instead of committing to the boring work of actually executing the idea. People who are less creative but execute more are typically the opposite. They don't get shiny object syndrome as much, and they're generally more okay with routine and structure and repetition. So they're happy to just grind away, and they're less likely to have all these other amazing ideas that they want to explore too. Annoying, right? Another reason we might end up in this mess is divergent versus convergent thinking. Creativity involves plenty of divergent thinking, basically coming up with multiple ideas or perspectives or solutions and making unique connections. So you're probably great at that. But when it comes to execution, you need convergent thinking, getting practical, narrowing things down, and systematically working through steps. You might not be as great with this. And wouldn't you know it, people who execute more are typically better when it comes to convergent thinking. So although they might not be able to see things with as much uniqueness or from as many angles as you, they're more likely to just find an answer and get the work done. And if that wasn't enough to feel like the world is playing some cruel joke on you, creative people are generally more sensitive in lots of ways. You're more likely to deal with perfectionism, overthinking, fear of failure, sensitivity to criticism, self-doubt, and other mental health struggles. All of these can make executing even more difficult. And again, the execution side tends not to suffer as much with this stuff. So with less getting in their way, they're more likely to follow through with the work. This would all be well and good if execution wasn't so important in the world we live in. And for many creatives, having great ideas just isn't enough. It won't fulfill you. You'll always feel like you're falling short of your potential. You need to actually make and share things. So what do you do here? Do you just have to force yourself? Do you bury your genius ideas and cave to making mediocre stuff that you don't care about just for the sake of getting it done? Or do you have to accept that maybe you're just not built for this world? None of the above. It's here we need to turn to the high-performing creatives, the ones who have great ideas and bring them to life consistently. Because although they're not nearly as common, they do exist. These are the ones who generally dominate the creative world. They're able to tap into their genius like you, but they're also able to keep up with the execution side. Really, they're kind of like super creatives. And the good news is, you can become one. The stuff that makes them great on both sides of this creativity execution deal is accessible to you. It's within you. So first, let's look at 4 of the biggest things that help these high-performing creatives get things done. Then we'll look at how you can work on this stuff to become a high-performing creative yourself. Number 1, cognitive flexibility. Highly creative people who also execute consistently are cognitively flexible. This means they're able to easily switch between mental modes, different ways of thinking. So instead of getting stuck in either convergent or divergent thinking, they can switch between modes as needed. Because of this ability, they get a lot of stuff done. But it's also actually good, a dream, right? So that's the first thing. The second is that these high-performing creatives have a higher tolerance for imperfection. They embrace progress, iteration, and consistent creation over perfection. So they're able to be less attached to any individual piece of work, block out their inner critic when needed, and reframe imperfection as a way to learn and improve. This is a massive superpower as a creative. A higher tolerance for imperfection removes a huge roadblock in the way of execution. But these creatives aren't careless all the way through the process. They know how to let the critical voice in at the right times, balancing this judgment-free flow of creation with the necessary narrowing in on the details. And that's why they're so effective. The third thing is that high-performing creatives have strong systems or routines in place to keep them on track and prevent them from getting lost in any one world for too long. Their routine might allow space for idea generation and execution, but in separate blocks, so they can get the best of both worlds: great ideas and consistent execution. I've personally found structure and routine to have one of the biggest impacts on my ability to consistently produce creative work. Not only does it keep me on track, but it helps keep me energized and always feeling fresh about my work. If you don't have some kind of routine, you're missing out. And I'll also share my highly effective routine shortly. Okay, and the fourth thing high-performing creatives have is a sense of purpose attached to their creative work. This is a big driver in people. Having purpose means you're working at something meaningful and ultimately bigger than yourself. And the positive biological impact of this is huge. A sense of purpose increases motivation, gives us energy, boosts resilience, helps us focus, and more. It basically gives us all the internal tools we need to stay productive and push through hard times. Working without purpose is hard to get excited about. And if you naturally struggle to execute, it's going to be even harder without a good reason, right? So this is a massively important part of how these creatives are able to get things done. Okay, now you know what makes a creative high performing, able to generate great ideas and execute consistently. So how do you become one of them? How do you work on these 4 big things to become a master of both sides? Let's take a look. If you want to improve your cognitive flexibility so you're able to better switch between idea and execution mode, you want to treat it like anything else that you train. It comes down to practice. You need to get your brain used to switching effortlessly between these modes. So to practice, set a small block of time dedicated only to idea generation, then set another block right after it dedicated only to execution. You can start with something small like 5 to 20 minutes while you're practicing and then build up over time. During each block, try to stay focused only on the thing that you're supposed to be focused on. The more you train this up, like a muscle, the more you'll strengthen the neural pathways associated with cognitive flexibility. Over time, you'll find it takes less energy to switch between these modes. You'll also boost your motivation through all the small wins you'll start to have. As someone who used to mess around a lot and not really get anything done, I've found cognitive flexibility to be extremely valuable. Not only has it helped me with my creative work, but it's also impacted my life in other ways. I feel more grounded overall. I can make better, smarter decisions. I'm able to better emotionally regulate. And I find it easier to work my way out of limiting thought spirals. So if you want to become a high-performing creative, one who dominates both ideas and execution, improving cognitive flexibility is well worth it. The next thing to practice is working with imperfection. Even though it might feel like the enemy, it's actually one of your best friends. You might struggle with perfectionism for a number of reasons: fear of failure, low self-worth, anxiety or a need for control, seeking approval, black and white thinking, constant comparison, unrealistic expectations, self-criticism, or maybe you just have high standards. Whatever the reason or reasons, you need a perspective shift here. Imperfection isn't a pest that needs to be exterminated. That's perfectionism. Imperfection can actually be the way out of the problems you're trying to solve with perfectionism. By reframing imperfection as a normal part of the process, you free yourself up to get more done and feel better about it. Things like fear of failure, low self-worth, and self-criticism lose their power in this setting, because the things you were feeling bad about are no longer a problem, right? They're just part of the deal. It's like if you woke up one day with messy hair and you felt bad about yourself because you're not put together, but then realized messy hair is just what happens when you sleep. Suddenly that messy hair isn't a source of self-criticism, it's just messy hair. Same with imperfection. Being imperfect doesn't say anything bad about you, it just makes you human. Once you accept this, you can start to loosen up and execute more ideas. You can tell yourself that the things you're trying to fix aren't problems in the first place. They're part of the work, part of you. And not only is imperfection not the enemy, it's essential for progress. The way to truly improve is to share. Let it become part of your creative process. Instead of trying to hide your imperfections from the world, Let the world in. Collaborate with it. Send stuff out. Get feedback. Learn, improve, send more stuff out, get feedback, etc. If you lock yourself away forever and never share anything, you'll lose sight of where you're at. You'll never know what's good enough to share, and you'll never feel ready to share. By seeing imperfection not as a pest, but as a way to grow, you get your power back. So start embracing, start practicing. Small steps first. Maybe you create something little that isn't perfect and let it out into the world. The more you do this, the more comfortable you'll get with sharing imperfect work. And soon enough, you'll be a master of execution. Because imperfection is no longer fighting against you. It's fighting beside you. Okay, the next thing that will help you become a high-performing creative is creating structure. Without structure, creatives get lost. And this can be an amazing thing, just not all the time. Bringing a bit of structure into your life can help you boost your productivity, improve your cognitive flexibility, which we now know is great for you, create the conditions for executing more often, and build momentum. A good place to start creating structure is with a routine. I know morning routines have kind of become a bit of a cringe thing, but I love mine so much that I can't wait to get out of bed in the morning, so I don't care. Here's my setup. I get up in the super early hours of the morning when it's still and quiet, usually no later than 5 a.m. and sometimes as early as 4 a.m. I write for about an hour to 90 minutes, and I use that writing for YouTube videos, podcasts, and newsletters. Then I go for a walk for about 40 minutes to an hour. On this walk, I generate content ideas and let my mind wander for a bit, which helps it make unique connections and usually gives me even more ideas. When I come back, I work on something for the future of my creative career for about an hour. Right now, this is a new digital product, but it could be anything. After that, I make a bit of content. If it's a written thing, most of the work is already done on the walk, so it takes no time. But if it's an animation or something more intense, it might take an hour. Usually by this point, it's about 8:30 to 9 a.m. And that's when I'll start working on stuff for the artists I'm working with one-to-one. How long that takes depends on what needs doing. But usually by about 10 a.m., I've done pretty much everything I need to. Then from 10 a.m. onwards is when I start my calls with artists for the day, if I have calls that day. Right now, for me, this works amazingly. Here's why, and why something similar may work really well for you if you have control over your days. First, I love it. I love every part of this routine. My favorite thing to do is write. So when I get up in the morning, it's the first thing I do. This is my highest return of investment activity as well, so huge win there. It's also so much easier for me to get a lot done in the morning because my willpower is so high. Then after about an hour, 90 minutes, I switch out of execution mode and into ideas mode, going for a walk. This switch refreshes my mind, gives me a little boost in creativity, and helps me train my cognitive flexibility. Then when I come back, I'm back into execution mode for a couple of hours, which gives me the same benefits again. And then going into the artist work after that is yet another change, which again re-energizes me. You do not have to do this if you don't want though. Getting up super early or constantly task switching isn't mandatory at all. It just works for me. But if you have the freedom to create a daily routine, ideally in the morning, I would recommend factoring in space for idea generation, space for execution, ideally first up, your highest impact activities, and doing work you love. You'll want to experiment for yourself to see what works best, because once you do, you'll feel unstoppable, and execution will become much, much easier. If you don't have control over your schedule, your focus should still be on prioritizing your highest impact activities. Clarify your goal and order accordingly. Ideally, you can still get something in the morning, but even if you can't, the afternoon or the evening is far better than nothing. When you have to compromise a lot, maybe with a 9 to 5 or other responsibilities, your goal should be to identify and prioritize your one thing, whatever will move the needle most for your goals. Start small. Even putting aside 5 minutes a day can do something, and will probably help you create more space anyway. And cement this space as your dedicated creative time. Nothing gets in the way of it. If you struggle to execute, structure and routine is one of your best friends. You don't want everything to be all structure and routine, but you need at least some to help you become that high-performing creative who actually brings your amazing ideas to life. Okay, let's move on to the final thing, and we'll keep it short. Working with purpose. If you struggle with execution and you don't have a strong enough reason to do what you're doing, you probably won't do it. If this is you, you need purpose. A goal you feel truly passionate about. Something that'll wake you up and get you to work. How do you find this? This is simplified, but 2 big things will help you here. Experimentation, self-reflection. First, you simply must experiment relentlessly to truly find something you can't stop obsessing about. Thinking about it alone will only get you so far. By letting yourself play, experiment, you're opening yourself up to all kinds of possibilities. You want to keep an open mind too. Don't be surprised if you realize that you actually love something you thought you'd hate. So go to town. Identify curiosities and interests and start messing around. See what happens. You can even explore combinations of curiosities and interests to see if that leads you anywhere interesting. Probably will. And alongside this experimentation, you want to do plenty of self-reflection. If you never do this, you might never find your way. You'll get stuck playing and you won't have direction. Self-reflection can help you understand and organize your thoughts and feelings. You can ask yourself honestly about your experiments. What are you loving? What are you not loving? What are you surprised about? What energizes you? What drains you? Cycling through experimentation and self-reflection can help keep you moving in the right direction, getting closer and closer to something that you can't pull yourself away from. When it comes to executing more often, purpose matters. Everything we've talked about today matters. With practice, you can learn how to execute more often. You can learn to finally bring all your amazing ideas to life and to give the world your gifts. It takes work, of course, but it is well worth it. Before you go, there's one more thing that massively impacts your ability to execute consistently, something we haven't really talked about today: motivation. It's entirely possible to increase your long-term motivation to achieve your goals. And if you're not currently super motivated, I have the perfect video for you to watch right now. You've got this. See you soon.